Welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast network. Here today, sitting on the stoop, we're going to get the scoop. We're going to step into the making of a warrior. Y'all want to know who we're going to be talking to? Before the trident, there was the test. Before the mission, there was the grind. Before the legend, there was the decision to endure. Our guest, Jack Ratliff, takes us inside the journey of becoming a Navy SEAL through discipline, sacrifice, setbacks, and relentless pursuit of excellence. From his college life to the intensity of Rammin, Sammy, to the proving grounds of Coronado, his story is more than training. It's about transformation. This conversation, is going to be about leadership, mental toughness, transition, and the legacy forged in fire through adversity. Now let's dive in. Hey Jack, how we doing today, brother?
We're
Greetings.
doing great. Couldn't be better. Thank you.
I want to say thank you for being we talked before we hit the record button. Thank you for being the OG of the Navy SEALs, right? We're gonna get into that of where you started in your journey. But before we start, I got the little scoop on you because I got the information. But I know the audience that's listening, that's watching, that's gonna like, subscribe, and share this with everybody that you come encounter with. What's the scoop on you, Jack? What's the scoop on Jack? What's the inside scoop?
That's kind of a tough overall question, but I grew up in a small rural town in West Texas, uh, out in the Mesquite Flats. I was a country boy. I had never been near the water than the Rio Grande, and suddenly I find myself in the Naval ROTC. So the reason people want to know why I chose the Navy, being from the dry land. But when I was going to college, number one, they were drafting everybody, and you couldn't finish your college degree unless you're in the ROTC. So I needed to be in one. And the Navy had a program where they paid your tuition and books and paid you $50 a month. Now, believe it or not, in these days of inflation, 50 a month covered almost all my monthly expenses. It was a really good deal back then. So that's what caused this dry lander to get in the Navy. And then once in the Navy, I actually started off wanting to go into flight training, and I went down to Pensacola. I finished pre-flight and was beginning to do flight training. But the Navy decided that my 3 years wasn't enough, and they wanted me to sign on for another 2 or 3 years. And I didn't want a career at that point, so I went to the fleet. And you mentioned the Rammin and Sammy. I was on board the USS Moore, and it's a destroyer. Before I came aboard in the Far East, some incompetent captain took out a pier with that ship. So it was known throughout the Far East as the Rammin Sammy, except that for our sailors, they'd go ashore and they always come back all beat up because somebody had sent Rammin Sammy. That was fighting words, man. You talk about the Rammin Sammy, you're going to have to deal with somebody. So anyway, that's how I got on board ship, and I was on there for a couple of years. Got qualified to be officer of the deck underway. That's the person in command of the ship, as you know. And I hit a lot of things. I learned a lot and grew a lot, but I was getting claustrophobic. I was getting fidgety. And so this flyer came through about the UDT SEAL training. At that point, it was UDT. It became SEAL while I was there. And so I was trying to get off that ship. And to tell you the truth, that's at that point, I had no idea what I was getting in for. If I'd have known, I might have thought twice about doing that. But that ship can make you wiggy. You stay out of sea for a couple of months, and you're nodding. You know what I'm talking about. We had a guy, a sailor, that we had to go tackle. He was taking pot shots over in Hong Kong at little bumboats around in the harbor. He was shooting at these guys, and that was the more exaggerated. But everybody got a little wiggy and a little quirky. So I was looking for an out. And like I say, if I'd known what I was signing up for, I might have thought twice about it. So
Nice.
that's how I wound
So
up in the SEALs and the UDT SEAL teams and that training.
nice. So you ended up in the SEALs and well, your journey was actually the reason why the SEALs came about, right? This is all the precursor before what we know today as the SEAL community.
Yeah, that's right. We started operating as SEALs when I was there, but it was a big secret deal then. It is shortly after I got out, uh, John Kennedy announced about the SEALs and their mission and so on. So it's not a secret anymore. But yeah, while I was there, and I remember clearly when somebody first told me that we were going to be called SEALs, and I said, "Well, why is that?" They said, "Well, it's sea, air, land." And I said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. Is that a seal can just barely get around on land, and they dang sure can't fly." So I said, and this is how smart I am. I said, "That's the dumbest name I've ever heard of. It'll never catch on." Well, here we are.
Here we are. So after you after you got out you did your military service, you went through you went back to school, you started being a professor teaching law, and then you say, you know what, I'm gonna write a book called Riding the White Bull, the making of a Navy SEAL. And this we're gonna be talking about today, everybody. So Sam, I always like to ask the authors about the cover because I'm looking at the cover. You know, I see the white bull. You know, I did some research. It's like, is this the one where you have the 8 seconds? Right? Like, man, you when they say you ride the lightning for 8 seconds, like in law enforcement, like you know, when you get tased, you got to ride that lightning. So riding the white bull. I see the cover of the book. What made you go with this cover right here?
Oh yeah, we debated about that a lot. I couldn't find a cover in the beginning. I couldn't find a cover that really accurately showed that, but that shows what's happening. If you'll notice on that cover, the rider's got a hand up in the air. Well, the first cover, I had somebody design the cover for me. The first cover, he had both hands on the rigging. Well, you don't do that. A bull rider knows you need that hand above you. That's how you keep your balance. So I doctored that photograph, but that came fairly close to representing what that's like. The other thing that's a little different about that is the bull is bucking up forward. Well, the hardest part's when they go the other way, and you know they got their rope up and they're trying to throw you off. So, but you talking about 8 seconds? I went to that old rodeo cabin when I signed up for that on the dare, for that rodeo. Again, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I knew I didn't know what I was doing. So I found this old retired rodeo cowboy outside of Austin, and I spent a good bit of time with him. He started getting me think by the numbers lessons on how to stay on the bow. But he said, you know, you only got to stay on for 8 seconds. But he said, let me tell you something, son. That's going to be the longest 8 seconds of your life. And he was right.
Yes.
He was right.
Nice. So yeah, so as I was going through the book, I see how you have it the book is in sections, right? So you have the first section as your college section, right? You talk
Yeah.
about the college, you talk about your fraternity, uh, you talk about your excitement inside the college, and then you saying that was prepping you, and you didn't even know it for a SEAL training before SEAL training even happened. So how did that journey connect to the SEAL training, right? Because I read in the book, it's like, well, I didn't even know I was prepping for the SEAL training because I was doing the
Yeah.
same thing when I was in college in the fraternity.
Well, you know, I'm not a fan of fraternity hazing. I think it's very dangerous. I think it's juvenile, kind of idiotic, actually. But I was put in charge of that. I volunteered to take charge of the pledge training because I didn't like the hazing, and my brother was going to be in that pledge class, and so I signed up to do that, to protect him really from excesses. But the reason you said, how did that prepare you? I'm not so sure as preparation, but it sure there were some things that caused a sense of recognition. Part of pledge training is you go through some deals where you do a lot of calisthenics, you do a lot of, you're sort of humiliated. You have to go without sleep for a week. And so when I got into SEAL training, it occurred to me whoever made up this training must have gone through a fraternity hazing because it was really familiar.
So I was saying that how you have the book broken down in three, and we talked about your college years. So, and in the book, you said that I did not realize how that was prepping me for SEAL training before
Yeah,
I even knew I was going into SEAL training.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't know it. I thought it was a nuisance and pain in the rear. Well, I felt that way about SEAL training too, but that's designed that way. You know, the Navy. I think the Navy. I'm proud to be in the Navy. I think they understand training better than most. They really know how to do it. Like when I started teaching in law school, I took some of the techniques I learned from giving instructions in the Navy, but their preparation was really good. But you have to know what they're trying to accomplish, and in those first months or 5 or 6 weeks, they're not looking for intelligence, they're not looking for strength, they're not looking for courage, they're looking for pure tenacity. They just want somebody who won't turn loose. And they're ingenious about the fact that I don't care. You can give me the person in the best condition in the world. Give me a marathon runner who swims long distance and so on, and I guarantee you they will push that person to his limits. Mine were shorter limits because I've been on a ship and I was put out
Right.
of anyway. So it was they reached mine pretty fast. But but the petty officer, one of my turned out to be one of my favorites, but he gave me a rough time because he liked me, I think. But he lined us up. There were 45 of us on the first day. He lined us up and he said, "Look," he said, "some of you may think you don't have the body for this." He said, "I'll tell you what, if you have the willpower, the Navy will give you the body." And he was absolutely right. And if you looked at that first 45 gaggle of people out there, you'd have never picked the ones. It was 9 that finally graduated. You never picked those 9 because it was all up here. It
Right.
wasn't in the body. And the Navy gave us the body just because we wouldn't quit. So I'm grateful to the Navy for that. I'm grateful to that instructor. He knew how bad I wanted off that ship. I was claustrophobic, and I told you about that. So he would give me a hard time, and then we'd be running in the beach sand out there off Coronado, and the destroyers are out. You can see them
Right.
flying up and down out in the water. And when he saw me starting to lag or starting to dog it a little bit, he would get in front of me, and of course, to rub it in, he'd run backward. He wouldn't say anything. He would just point out toward the destroyer out there because he knew how much I didn't want to go back. And boy, that was enough. That picked up my pace right there.
Uh,
So anyway, I'm grateful. That guy he was a good part of me getting through the training, even though he was giving me a hard time every day.
I could bet every day was a challenge. Did you automatically think like, man, I'm gonna make it through? Because you said you started out with 45 and y'all graduated with 9. Like, was there
Yeah,
like certain points like I don't know if I could make it to the next day? Like I could like you talk about that mental fortitude,
yeah, yeah,
you passing the physical endurance, right? But it's that mental
yeah.
fortitude because they said they want to
Oh,
see, where you at the core, who you are.
yeah. Yeah, so you're saying that did I ever have moments where I didn't think I was gonna make it or I thought about quitting? Only about 10,000 of them. I mean, it's it's in your mind all the time. You got this little devil on your shoulder that's whispering in your ear, saying, "Just go ring the bell. We can be out of this crap right now." But, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was. Honestly, I think you've got a little bit of a screw loose if you get it through that training. And I say that with great respect for my comrades because once we were out of there, they're some of the best adjusted, normal people I've ever been around. But you got to have an abnormal need to prove yourself. We had guys come in there, football stars, big guys from UCLA.
They wouldn't
They were
make it.
out there within a week.
Yeah.
And man, who needs this crap? We're out of here. And I don't criticize them. I think they had a little better sense of their self-worth than I did at the time. But I had tricks. I was asking you if you had tricks you played on yourself about your comeback. And one of the tricks is I would take it like an alcoholic, like a recovered alcoholic.
Nah.
I'd say to myself, okay, I'm going to get through one more day. I'm not looking past that. I'm going to
Yeah.
get through one more day and then I quit. And some days it'd be till noon, I can quit. Some days it would be, it finally sometimes got down to 10 minutes. I'll go through the next 10 minutes, and after that, I can quit. And
Wow.
it's a series of mind games. That was only one of them, but you have to play those kind of games, or I did, to keep your mental state such that you keep on going. So you asked if I thought about quitting. Yeah, probably about every 10 minutes.
And you
I'm
know,
glad I didn't.
yeah.
I had one boy who started with me, and he dropped out after a week, and he didn't have any orders anyplace else. So he's hanging around the base, drinking at the old club, and he'd come over to my barracks, and I was tired, beat up, trying to get ready for the next day, and he'd sit on my bed, practically in tears. He said, "I'm such a coward. Why did I quit? I'll never be. I will hate myself," and so on. And of course, it was a nuisance because I was trying to get ready for the next day. And so I told him, Al, you can't unring the bell. They ask you, if you really want to quit, they ask you 3 times. You really want to quit. So I
Mm.
said, there's nothing I can do about that. So I need to get ready for the next day. Well, he'd leave and then he'd come back the next night. So it was a big nuisance at the time. But in an odd way, I think he's what caused me to get through that. When I thought about quitting, I thought, well, no matter how bad this is, it's not so bad as the self-hatred I saw in this guy who was hating himself for quitting. And by the way, I don't pass any judgments on anybody who
Right.
dropped out of that. Like I say, it probably people in their complete right mind who are well adjusted that wouldn't put up with it going someplace else. But having said that, I'm very proud that I made it through.
And that's good. So you hit a very interesting times like, hey, just make it to the next day. Make it and now you
Yeah,
start to dwell a lot, man, just make it to the next 10 minutes. I'll quit in the next 10
yeah,
minutes. And then when 10 minutes come, I quit in the next 10 minutes. And you keep pushing yourself. It's like little wins. Like, Jack, I shared with you my story, and I was at a
yeah,
point to where I was telling myself, Kings, just make it to tomorrow. That's it. Cause
yeah.
I said I gotta stop looking 2, 3 years down the road because I was just trying to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
Just make it to
And,
tomorrow.
and, we had a similar experience, and my hats off to you to get through that. But you know what? The reason you do it in those little chunks, if you look at the whole program ahead of you, like with you, the next 3 years, with me, it was only for the next 6 months. But I thought if you looked at that whole stretch, you'd just say, can't do it. And and so you begin to see the wisdom of the old Chinese saying, the longest journey begins with the same step.
Yeah.
You just keep taking the next step and the next step and the next step. And if you don't quit, you'll get there. But you don't want to look ahead at the whole scope because that's a recipe for failure.
It gets overwhelming. And that's where it's so in part 2 of the book. The Rammin Sammy, that I call that the preparation part of the book, right? Because there's 3 stages, right?
Yeah.
So this is the preparation part of riding the bull. Why was it critical, Rammin Sammy? Why was that a
Well,
critical mention in the book?
I think a number of things. For one thing, I hope it shows how you can cope with oppressive superiors.
Mm.
Now, I won't ask you to get a person about that. You might explain his feelings, but with your long military service, I bet you are under some people who are incompetent or bullying or both. And I had to deal with that. And so uh, the adjustment to that, I think, stood me in good stead later in training. I had a mentor. He's kind of the Mr. Roberts figure of our ship. He was not the captain or the exec, but he was the next. He was operations officer. And my friend and I was on the same ship with a college friend of mine. And we were both grousing about the exec and the captain, and we were kind of considered being rebellious. And he got us aside. He said, "Look, you signed up for this. Nobody, not to hold that for credit. They're going to capture you out of a bar and threw you on the ship. You signed up for it."
Right.
And he said, and the captain's not going to change, the exec's not going to change, but said, you need to do the best job you can despite them, and do that for your own self-respect and nothing else. And I really think we did that. In fact, I
Mm.
honestly think we would have done that even if he hadn't said it. But that attitude really helped later when I was undergoing some of the stresses of SEAL training, though I didn't have any incompetent. Well, I had one drill instructor who started taking pot shots at me in the water. But other than that, I didn't have anybody I had to deal with that was that difficult. So I think there are lessons in how you survive under oppressive leadership. And I'm not proud of it. We took some petty ways to, you
Right.
don't have, you can't just get in the finger. You got to do what they say. So what I did is I got a little patch for my foul weather jacket. It had a picture of somebody that looked like a Navy captain and a slash through it. And the motto on it was illegitimate non them, which is only Latin for don't let the bastard grind you down.
Right.
And so when they were up on the bridge and the exec leaned over and read that, and he never said anything to me about it. The captain never did. So I just concluded they thought I was complaining about some other bastard than them. But yeah, you resort to some pettiness,
Right.
but it didn't affect the performance of the ship. And I'll be honest, I was not a very good midshipman. It took me a while. Even when I was first in the Navy, I kept rebelling. I kept not wanting to do it their way. I thought the things were silly and so on. And I finally had to, then I kept getting into trouble. So I finally had to have a little talk to myself. And I said, this is a big machine. It's just like a big thresher. And
Yes.
it does not give a rat's ass about you or anybody else. If you stand in front of it, it's going to keep mumbling over you and throwing you and spitting you out. So at
Yes.
that point, I made the decision that it might be just easier to do what they tell you. And I got along a whole lot better after that. I sort of became a partner with the Navy.
Uh,
So,
so what was
yeah, there
one
were
of
lessons.
yes, so what was one of the strategies that helped you mentally prepare? Because you said, okay, they're not leaving, you're not leaving, and you have to get through the train. Like you have to how can I figure out a way that where we both could stay? That way I move on, go through it, and then we go our separate ways after. But is
Yeah.
that initial, head button, like how did you or what strategies did you use?
Yeah. Well, several, I guess. One is I've learned not to take it personally. I thought
Mm,
the guy that we had as the exec is a guy who had actually left the Navy. He'd gone broke in the insurance business.
mm,
And he came back in the Navy. And I thought, this is not so much about Jack Ratliff as it is about my CO and exec. And if they're dealing with their own problems,
right.
where they come from, so I can't handle that. And it's an old cliche, but it's true. You can't handle that. You can just handle your reaction to it. And I just thought I was not going to react. And I got to hand it to them. I didn't make it. I didn't make it a secret that I didn't much like their leadership, but I got good fitness reports the whole time I was on board. And I think that either the captain saw that he should collect an objective report, or this mentor I was telling you about may have had something to do with that. So I got to hand that to him, despite my sometimes sterling that he getting me good grades. I could have made a career out of the Navy. It's just not what I was wanting to do.
Right. And then that's where we get into the transformation, right? The part three, Coronado, right? So Coronado, that's the training establishment. So what was your first real shock the moment at Coronado? Like what was like, oh man, like this like okay, this is real. Like that cold water,
Yeah,
that going, yeah, like this is like what was that first
yeah.
moment that you realized like, all right, yeah, this is this is legit.
Well, small thing really, but we got issued new shoes. They don't, not the combat boots. They just big old work shoes, and so the first day out, we're out jogging in the sand on the beach, and Murphy, this guy I was telling you about, the instructor that was on my case, he said, "Okay, go run out in the salt water with your shoes on." He said, "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, run out with shoes on." And so we did that. Had to be told a couple of times. And oddly enough, I found out that caused the shoes to conform to my feet, and it made them more supple. And I didn't ever get any blisters. So that wasn't a huge surprise, but it was a funny thing to have to do in your first day out. I guess the other surprise was the intensity on day one of the training. It was all in and knock yourself out. And if you look like you were getting warm or getting dry, get back in the water so it get cold again. Uh, they the drills that they had were diabolical. From
Right.
one of them is you put one or two of your teammates in one of those rubber boats, and then everybody else lies under the back end of the boat. You do upside down push-ups. I never saw that anyplace else. You got another drill called that. This was a real shock. It's a telephone pole drill, and it's the one they still do.
Oh, the one where you
But
put up and over, where you run it
yeah,
and you,
when you start up sitting on the sand, and somebody else comes, another crew comes over and dumps this thing in your lap, and you have to do curls with that telephone pole. Well, first of all, it's heavy as hell. It really teaches teamwork because everybody's got to do it. You don't get pulled up,
mm,
and you've been in trouble. So that now, I clean the guys today are a little bit weenies because they use poles that have been smoothed off. We had just real telephone poles that
with
had
splinters and
pre-soaked in
everything,
them
right?
and splinters taken out. And so as soon as you finished that drill, you had those splinters that stuck you all in, and then make you go in the salt water and it just burned like crazy. So I've kidded. So I know some SEALs who have come out recently, and I've kidded them a little bit. I said, "Well, yeah, you guys think you got it tough, but you didn't have a real telephone pole." But they do that. And what dinner drill you're talking about is you not only do the curls, but then you get it up, move it around
Yeah.
over your head. But, uh, the Navy's smart and the SEAL teams are smart. That teaches teamwork in a way that fewer other drills do.
Mm. So what did you learn about yourself during the training? Because I know it was like you probably had a lot of conversations with yourself, internal conversations. So what did that teach you when you was
Uh,
going through the training? Because I know it's in the book, but I just want the listeners to hear the
yeah,
intensity because that what I got from it was fortitude, endurance, consistency, the don't quit
yeah,
mindset, like make it another 10 minutes, that keep moving forward because other people are depending on you. Because you said you can't do
yeah,
it by yourself. It's a team effort. Everything is a team effort. It's like
yeah.
you're not here by yourself.
I guess the main thing I got out of it was you mentioned it. It's kind of simple to say, hard to do, but the value of tenacity.
Mm,
You can overcome a lot of problems if you just tenacious enough. And in fact, this book's a kind of an illustration of that because when I first started writing it, I didn't know what I was doing, and it wasn't very good. And I had a friend who kept coaching me. That thing's been about 8 years in the making. I just wouldn't turn loose of it. And now I'm proud of the book. I've gotten some good reviews on it, and so it turned out. But I don't know if that came out of the Navy or if I'd been that way, but I think it probably did come out of the teams. Is that I you just if you don't turn loose, you can get a lot of things done, even if you don't have much talent or strength.
yeah.
Uh, I guess the main lesson I took out of all that is the value of sticking to it. And
Right.
the other thing is we're talking about that. Don't look ahead at the whole thing. Uh, it wouldn't have occurred to me after the first week that I was ever going to make it through that if I didn't shouldn't shorten the time horizon
Right.
like we were talking about.
And how did the training shape your leadership philosophy, right? Because you did that and then you went into academics to start teaching the generation that coming up in the law field.
Um,
So I know some of that training you
Well,
took
that was,
over, to the
yeah.
academic side.
Well, it gives you a kind of confidence, I guess, that nothing else does. But also, I guess I noticed it more when I was practicing law before I went to teaching. And that is that having gone through that, you're confident you can get through some pretty tough things. There were times, sometimes I'd be trying a case in court, and it'd be going over a month. I would be totally exhausted, wiped out. I'd be down in my office at 3 in the morning trying to get ready for the next day. And I would say to myself, well, this is nothing as bad as Hell Week. I mean, this is a piece
Right.
of cake. Oh, and you've got that comparison, some of the things
Right.
that make us all a little crazy and seem like real burdens, they don't look so big. And the other lesson, of course, I keep repeating, but I knew that if I just kept plodding ahead at 3 a.m., I'll
Mm.
stay there for 30. And if I do that for the next 3 nights, I'd likely win my case,
Yeah.
which
And that's why
I did. So,
pushing through when everything else says quit. Like, man, just go ahead and give it up. But you said, no, I can't. Like, I can't. Just
yeah.
Jack, just ring the bell. Just just ring the bell. Go ahead. It's right there.
Right.
It's right there. We got the cup
It's
of
all there.
coffee, everything. Just ring the bell. And you took that
Yeah.
training over to life after the military, and he's like, I'm not ringing that bell. I'm gonna stay in there and work this caseload. I'm gonna stay and do. I'm not ringing the bell.
And, and the instructors, they so mean. They would say it, kill them and say, you can quit this right now. Said, there's some
Mm.
hot coffee over there. There's some hot soup. We'll get you back to Gold Club tonight. You can be watching a movie by tonight. I mean, they did that all the time. And I don't think they really thought that was going to discourage or encourage anybody. Their idea of having fun, uh, which, you could tell the difference. I have more than one instructor that were really kind of sadistic. And of course, that's part of the job. But the ones that I like could be tough on you, really tough, and still they, they knew yeah, they knew they'd have my respect
Right.
because I knew that they just do the job. You're not being I don't want to use the P word, but you're not being a jerk. You're not being a good instructor.
Right.
I mean, you got to be a jerk. And as I say in the book, some of those guys were jerks because they're required by the job. Some of them were jerks just because they were jerks and they came in and worked well for them and the teams. But not many. I
Right.
can only think about two. One of them was the chief who decided he hated me for reasons I never did understand. And he's the one that started taking pot shots at me during the swinging drill. But he was the notable exception. Most of the guys I knew there were really well adjusted, very confident. They're confident people before they showed up there, but certainly the training getting a new level of confidence, I think.
That's like, and so you have all these different marks in your journey. You do military, you transition to academics. What is the hardest part you think for transition for elite performers? Right? Because now you're going in a whole different direction, but that transition
Yeah,
and that's what this show focus on too is like one of the things we say here is you don't have to drown in the sea of transition, but definitely the part of transition for elite performers. What's some of the recommendations you
yeah,
could give to people to make it less hard, right? Because it transition is hard in itself, right? Like going from one thing to the next,
yeah,
especially if you don't know
yeah.
what's down the road, right? You don't know what's in front, you don't know what's around the corner. Like it's
Yeah,
and then the book definitely talks about that. And I just want you to share what's the hardest part of transition for elite performance you think?
yeah, oddly enough, even though I resisted military discipline and was a bad midshipman and came to understand it, oddly enough, the absence of any structure
Mm,
of requirement. Suddenly, nobody's telling you when you got to show up. Nobody's going to tell you what job you're going to get or what training you're going to get.
right.
You're there and you're ready to decide all that stuff. And I didn't have a really hard time with that, but I did find it a little bit, at first, I was a little bit at sea because it's kind of like I was looking around waiting for my next set of orders,
Mm,
somebody to tell me what's going to go on. So I think the discipline, it's double-edged sword. I think in one sense, you could get to where you depend on the discipline. Uh, and in another sense, you're a lot of time resisting it as I did. But I don't know. I did not have a particularly hard time with the transition, but my hat's off to our warriors who have actually been in combat. I was really lucky. I was there between Korea and Vietnam. Never had a shot fired in anger. And I've done a lot of work with my wife at the homeless shelter here now in Santa Fe. And I see these guys, they're not in the stats anywhere. They're not listed as injured, but they're never going to have another peaceful day in their life if they're not attacking that with
mm,
drugs or something else. And I felt it just tears at your heart to see these guys. But that's the consequence of combat that I was lucky enough to avoid. And I tell them that those combat veterans, and I think maybe you've been in action. My hat's off to you guys because you have gone through something that I'll never understand. Even though I went through a lot of trials from this stuff.
But
So
Jack,
hats off.
I know hats off to you because you just mentioned one great thing I definitely want to um, chat about too is you just shared about your wife, right? You just said, you're going to each other. Like, what role do you think that family plays a part of a journey? Like that support element that a lot of people don't see that's behind the scenes.
Well, everything.
Mm,
And you know what? We're going to get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose our DNA. And I really lucked out
mm,
because I was raised in a small West Texas town, and I don't think I'd care about being there today. But, it's a little town like that's a confidence builder. I was a medium good athlete. No colleges were trying to sign me up, but
right.
there's nobody bigger than a senior at Sonora High School. I had a leather jacket that had 4 bars and stars and footballs and basketballs. And so I've got a theory about that. It may not be the direct answer to your question, but that is if you can develop is you can be a big fish in a small pond. If you can develop the
Mm,
confidence, it carries over when you get in a big pond because you got an experience of success with things like that. And I think that's what the small town did for me and my parents. My parents devoted themselves to our well-being. And I think that they gave a lot of good character lessons. I know my father did. He was a retired coach, but he was different from the usual stereotype of somebody who's yelling at you and wants to win. He didn't care whether we won, but he sure cared if we weren't paying attention
right.
or if we were completing without calls or if we didn't congratulate our opponents when we got through. We'd hear about that in no uncertain terms. But he never raised his voice. It was just you wanted so badly to please him that
Right.
you wanted to perform. And my mother was the same way. And then I've been very fortunate in that the woman I married just after I got out of the service, we've been married 65 years now, and
Congrats.
I've never made it without her.
And that
Well, my advice to younger people is that the first 60 are the hard ones. The rest of them can be easy.
And that's all I was gonna say. So, what legacy do you want to leave? So, this book this came out in March of 2026. You said 8 years in the making. So, after a little over 250 pages in here, what legacy do you want to leave? Like I tell people, like, and this is one thing that I've seen. That's why I love to get like the actual paperback books because this right here is I call it historical data, right? It's historical data,
Yeah,
right? Is
yeah,
it's not digital because it can't get changed, right? I have my copy. This is mine. Thank you for that, by the way. Um, like the legacy, like what? Because I know what I got from the book, right? Like I shared with you, and that's why I
yeah,
shared with you my journey
yeah,
because I seen me riding this bull, right? And
yeah,
a lot of times I fell off, but you know what, Jack? I got back up and I said, man, let me strap on again. Let me how you say
yeah.
I forgot what you call that glove. Like, you mentioned it in the book. Like you have to have that extra tightening. You can't have both hands up because you're gonna fall. So you're gonna have to have that
That's right.
balance. That
That's
balance.
right.
So when I read the book, I was like,
Yeah,
wow, how many times, how many
yeah,
people have actually rode the white bull and they didn't realize it? They lasted the eight
yeah.
seconds,
Good
or they
point.
or they made it to 2 seconds. But guess what? They got back on, and they got back
Yeah,
on.
that's right. Well, as far as a legacy, I don't know that that's a pretty Tony word. I think what I would like to do, one of the main motivations I have for that book is when you get to my age, you kind of like to leave a record of what you were like.
Mm.
And, when you go look at the old family albums, you see all these musty old pictures of grandparents, and they're just old guys with funny hairdos and funny clothes, and you don't read anything about it. So I wanted to leave something that would show some of the things I did and something about my personality. My fantasy is that 3, 4 generations from now, some little kid will pull this book off the shelf and he'll say, "Dad, what is this?" And Dad'll say, "Well, son, that's a book. People used to get their information from books.
Right.
If you read that book, you can learn something about your great great grandpa." And then the kid will say, of course, "Well, Dad, we don't read books anymore. We do holograms." And so, but that's my hope is, I think that's the main motivation I had. I just wanted, I'm 91 years old now, and I don't know how much
Man, that's
longer my trail is going to last. So I
wow.
just wanted to leave a little marker so that my great great grandchildren will know something about what the old man was like.
Wow. I was just about to ask you, what does the riding the bull means to you today? Riding the white bull, what does it 91 years, that's a blessing right there. Like I tell people like you want to get wisdom, you find somebody who's been around for a while that's seen the ebbs and flows of life. What does riding the
Yeah.
white bull mean to you today? Or because I know
It,
what it meant that what I took away from it when you wrote about the, this is going through your life, but now we're here. The book got launched in 2026. And what does it mean to you today in 2026, riding the white bull?
yeah. I guess I guess one message, maybe the message is that you can overcome some rash decisions if you work at preparation and you're tenacious. I got a saying where I grew up is, good gravy will cover a lot of bad biscuits, you know. So if you uh,
I like
if you
that.
think about it, if you think about this in the right way, you can overcome. For example, looking back at agreeing to write that, well, that was really stupid. One of the interviewers asked me, he said, "What would you, for your older self, if you were talking to your younger self, what would you tell him?" And I'd say, "Don't ride that bull." I mean, that was
Right.
you'll get around it. It was them. But I knew that I didn't know what it was doing. And I went and interviewed this old rodeo cowboy who gave me lots of really good tips. If I hadn't done that, I, I don't know if I would have made it. I probably got hurt. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you've made a rash decision or whatever, don't forget that you can dig yourself out with enough preparation. And going back to my broken record, tenacity.
Yes.
Don't turn loose of it. So I suppose that's what I hope the book will say or something.
I found some information. I went through the book. I looked on it in the web, and I see some verbiage. You said one of the things was discipline builds warriors, and
Yeah.
and
Well,
what's the scoop on that,
you know
Jack?
as well as I do.
Yeah.
You know as well as I do. That's what the military is all about and what they're really good at. Well, we got the best military in the world. But you can't have what we have without discipline. And that there, as you know from your experience, there are two kinds of discipline. There's a discipline that is enforced on you, which you have to, but there's self-discipline. And I think that the military, once you get used to being disciplined by others, you begin to develop the ability to discipline yourself. And when I was rebelling and acting up, they call it captain's mate. I screw up the word
Yes.
captain. They can
Captain Smash,
sound
yes.
like you might have been there before.
Maybe a call yeah.
Well, you know, to go with that. But you wind up standing before the captain enough, you trying to figure out, I better go along. I
Uh,
better be partnered with the Navy. But so that's external discipline. But what it results in, then, after you realize that you're going to have to kind of conform, is that you begin to develop self-discipline. And I think that's true at all levels. Uh, Officer enlisted, PSC, seaman, whatever. But I think I think that the external discipline finally manifests itself in internal discipline. It carries over when you get out of the military.
what about this one? Endurance is a decision.
I agree, absolutely, and that's why I kept playing those tricks on myself. They, we're talking about this. the discipline, and of course, with the hierarchy, and the officers give orders to enlisted
Mhm,
folks. But training, we were taking orders for instructors, and they were barking, as they call us, pukes and worms,
mhm.
but they were required to call us sir because we weren't. So when the enlisted instructor said sir, it had all the warmth of worm or puke or boron. I mean, they managed to say it in a way. They managed to say it in a way that you didn't have any doubt about what they were saying. So, but again, that's a form of discipline. You learn to put up with that because you discipline yourselves. You don't, the chef, you don't have a tantrum. You don't jump ship. I did. The book tells about a case where I did not respond to the program or the discipline because of my swim partner. He was a guy from Japan. He was more senior than most of us. And he was a strong guy and he was courageous, but he was panicky in the water. And I was assigned as a swim partner, which meant my life could depend on it. So I went to our superior and said, he doesn't need to be in this program. And of course, I was scared to death. They're going to wipe me out. That was really a cheeky thing to do, but I did it. And he explained to me that it was politics, that Japan was going to start a SEAL team over there, and this guy was going to go back over there and start it. So they could not wash him out. Well, this is kind of a spoiler, but he's the guy who drowned when the training was over because he panicked in the water. They were not allowed by the higher ups in Washington to do what the instructors knew needed to be done. They knew they needed to wash him out, but you couldn't do it. So I take I took exception to that part of the military. Sometimes decisions are made that you have experienced, I'm sure, are made at a very high level for good reasons at that level that do not work out at all in practice and can result in some very tragic situations. It was sad to see that guy go because he was trying his best, but he just didn't belong in that particular environment. If he'd been anybody else, if he'd been from Ohio, they would have washed him out.
Yeah. So what's
By the
one?
way, they don't wash out many people. Very rare. They just make it hard enough that you wash yourself
Yeah,
out.
there you go. Ring the bell. There you go.
Yeah.
Ring the bell.
Ring the
So,
bell,
how,
ring the bell, and you can go back.
yeah. So how can they get a copy of your book? How can they reach out to you? Uh, Riding the White Bull, the making of a Navy SEAL. How can they get a copy of this?
Uh,
Where can they get it?
yeah,
Yeah, I know you have some couple of book signing coming up and book
yeah,
tours.
yeah. Okay, I can tell you. I've got a website, jackratliff.net, but it's also available online from Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Bookshop. And most bookstores have it. It's distributed from Edgar Spark, and all bookstores get books from them. And so, if you want to, I encourage people to trade with their local bookseller, and if you can get it from them. If they don't have it, they can get it within a few days. So they get it at all those places.
Okay, awesome.
I got some good reviews on Amazon, by the way. I was very pleased about that. I didn't know how this book was going to be received.
No,
Frankly, I thought.
like I said, when I read it, I automatically I shared with you, the journey and stuff. So
Yeah,
I could see me like I could put myself on this picture right here of of
yeah,
riding the bull right here.
yeah,
So no, I
yeah.
just want to say thank you for taking the time out, coming here to share the information on the scoop. One thing like I share with you, one thing about the VET S.O.S podcast network is we like to say you don't have to drown in the sea of transition. You grab that lifeline. We're here to help. Every day is a transition. Every day somebody is riding that white bull. Every day.
Sure.
If you get when you get this book, it's gonna mean something different to you as it did for me because I took away with how it reflected in me and my journey. Jack wrote it for his and his journey, but when you get it, you'll see how to align with you and your journey. So until next time, everybody, take care.
Thank you, Kings.
Uh,